The following is intended for mature audiences only. Discretion is advised.
Didn't like the Clinton administration say something about like the songs that were happening on Power Rangers?
Yeah, they were, there was a whole thing going on with Al Gore's wife at that time. He was VP to Clinton, and all the Clinton fundraisers were done at Saban's house in the 90s. And the heat was getting a little hotter with people thinking the music from Power Rangers or why their kids are beating the hell out of each other, which is absurd.
Yeah, why would they do that with a song called Go, Go, Go Combat? Why would...
Yeah. Yeah, really. I guess I should have said, go, 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 help your sister.
What's up, besties? Welcome back to another episode of Childlike at Best with Mike Valdes. I am still the second part of that title. Boy, oh boy, am I excited about today's episode. Today's episode is Ron Wasserman. Ron is a composer who has made so many amazing compositions and music for things that you may have heard of, like Power Rangers, Dragonball Z, one of the most famous animated TV show theme songs, the X-Men animated series. That was Ron. I'm genuinely so lucky that I got to talk to him. It was such a thrill. He told me so many stories from writing songs for Power Rangers and some of the problems that he had even with the Clinton administration because of the way that he was writing the songs, as well as how he wrote the X-Men theme song and Dragon Ball Z, Ace Ventura, so many cool things. And it was such a fun conversation. And in fact, I don't want to hold you much longer here. The only thing that I want to say is that if you want to support the show, please subscribe, tell a friend, and also we're on YouTube, so make sure that you're watching the YouTube video. If you're listening, that's totally fine too. Also, if you want to support, we have merch. You can go to childlikewonder.co. There's so many awesome pieces there. I'm actually wearing one of them right now. It's the Viewmaster crew neck right there that says Childlike Wonder. But again, you can go to childlikewonder.co. There's the whole collection. Like I said, I don't want to hold you any longer. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with the very talented Ron Wasserman. I usually like to start this podcast by asking my guests, where did they grow up?
I grew up in the San Fernando Valley, just outside of Los Angeles.
Okay.
Back when you could actually drive anywhere in Los Angeles. Right?
Yeah. That's a wild thing to think right now. Yeah.
Oh, it's crazy. So I'm a Southern California native, one of the few. I don't know where everybody went, but I rarely meet anybody that was born and raised here.
Wow. I love that. And like, what kind of kid would you say that you were growing up? Like, who did you sit with at the lunch table and all that kind of thing?
I was the kid who was the artist. So okay. I was the non-sports guy.
Right.
I was the guy who couldn't ride a skateboard. So what I would do is I was the guy who would make movies of the kids on their skateboards and make friends with everybody who was a badass. Yeah. And that way, when I sat at the lunch table and if anybody was coming over to harass me, there was a whole group of people that would come over and make sure I wasn't harassed.
That's the way to do it, man. That is the way to do it. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely relate to that too, because skating was a really big thing when I was in high school or at least middle school because of the Tony Hawk Pro Skater games. And I was just so bad at it, man. And one of those things too that I found out was I have a very low pain tolerance, and you need an extremely high pain tolerance if you want to be a skateboarder. So yeah, I was very much that guy that I would hang out with the skateboard kids, and like, you know, I was kind of the funny kid as well. So I would always tell jokes to kind of chameleon my way into every kind of group.
Right.
Which I feel like every artist is kind of like that, right? Where you kind of just can chameleon your way into everyone, you know?
Yeah, you don't want people to kick your ass, so you make friends with the people who are tough.
Exactly. You're absolutely right. That's so funny. Yeah, man, I love that so much. So it's so funny because, like, you know, for people that may not know, Ron Wasserman is the composer extraordinaire of many different theme songs and different scores of projects that you may have seen, like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and quite honestly all the Power Ranger series, right? The Zeo and all that stuff.
Yeah, the first 4 or 5 years, and then back in 2005 for SPD, and then back for the 30-year special where they used the original theme, but it was so fun to score that. So fun. Yeah,
I actually just was watching it in preparation for this, and it is phenomenal because you found a way to, like, bring back the nostalgia, of course, but also have these beautiful beats, because there's a lot more drama in this special than usual. And so you found a lot of ways to put, like, emotional things into it. And it kind of, you know, music, it's so funny, man. I found when I was a kid, I had a music teacher who showed us Tom and Jerry with no music. And then he was like, this is how important music is to TV and to cartoons.
It's a perfect example.
Yeah.
That old stuff. Yeah, it wouldn't work.
Yeah. There was no comedy at all. You just felt bad for the cat. You know what I mean? Like, and then when there is music, you're like, oh, like, this is all a joke. And, like, you know, okay, I get this now. And that's it's so funny how music can, like, do that to you. So in fact, so much so that you wrote songs that made kids want to punch each other and
sorry about that.
No, you're all good, man. You're all good. And in fact, one of my, and I have to talk to you about this, cause I have a bone to pick with you, Ron. You gave so many people the inkling or the what's it called? The hankering to want to learn how to play electric guitar because of that Power Rangers theme. And I found out there's no guitars in that theme at all. So
I can't play a note, but I've fooled the best. I once, long story short, so I meet Eddie Van Halen. I'm up at his house. He was married to Valerie Bertinelli, and he handed me a guitar and wanted to see how I played that theme because he had to learn it for his son Woofy, who said, Dad, learn this groove. And I handed him back the guitar and went to the piano and played the rhythm, and he just looked at me like, you gotta be kidding me.
That is so funny, man. I mean, cause you imagine like a metal guy, like shredding, you know, just, you know, but then, like, it's so funny how, like, you know, back then, you know, and I mean, as far as I know, this was back in what, the 90s when you made this?
Oh yeah. It was 93, I think, when I wrote that theme. Oh, it was a nightmare.
I'm sure.
Yeah, we had two giant 2-inch tape machines that had to sync to everything. So when I was doing the vocals or anything, you had to roll back 30, 40 seconds, hit play, hope to God everything locked up. And then you're listening. Let's say I just wanted to punch one line in, which means I just hit record and then tap myself out of recording. The slightest mistake, got to go back and redo it again, roll back 30, 40 seconds, wait for it. It was just, you know, for the time, it felt very badass because you're in a giant studio and you have all this gear and everything was really fun. But in hindsight, What a nightmare. I would die if I had to do that now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Technology has made it to where we can do that on our iPhones now. Like it's wild. I mean, sure, it won't sound as great as, using Pro Tools and things like that, but we can technically do it, on our iPhones if we wanted.
Believe me, it works. I was working with this guy, Cedric the Entertainer.
Love him.
And I played him. I sent him the instrumental track. He's in his car. He listens to it. The guy is just from another planet.
Yeah.
He listens to it, and then he just takes his phone and records the vocal. And it was like 30, 40 seconds. He hit the exact tempo. He never really drifted. I only had to move a little bit. He sends me that from his phone, and that was the final vocal we used on this track for his TV show.
Amazing. I love that.
Why do I even have a microphone anymore? Just recording your phone. It sounded great too. You couldn't tell.
That's so funny, man. Yeah, how technology has changed because that tape that record to tape really was difficult. I mean, granted, I wasn't producing back then, but I definitely remember like recording like vocal stuff on it, and it was wild, man. So crazy. Going back to childhood, I wanted to ask you kind of a lighthearted question here. What were your favorite snacks growing up?
Oh, I remember we didn't have many, but I would say Hostess cupcakes were probably the thing.
Yes, dude. Absolutely. Yeah. Where's the cream filling? Yeah.
Where's the cream filling?
I love it. Yeah, man. It's we talk about this a lot on my podcast, but Hostess and many of the snacks that we weren't allowed to have when we were growing up comes from the age of what I call the radioactive sludge era of food, where oh man,
that stuff was pure poison.
Yeah. Yeah. Because we were it
really was.
Yeah. It was absolutely awful for us. And if you eat that now, it'll ruin your day.
Yeah. I just walk by it and see it and I'm like, oh.
Yeah. It's crazy, man. I mean, and, funny enough, I actually remember Hostess doing, the Ninja Turtle ones, and I'm sure they had a Power Rangers version of everything, because dude, they put Power Rangers on everything. I had Power Rangers shampoo.
Everything. I got a funny story about that. So
please,
I met the guy. He was friends. He was playing in a band with my ex-wife. A great guy, and he went in just at the very beginning of Power Rangers. And he was able to secure all the rights for a fee to license the image for food packaging. So he rolled the dice thinking the show may turn into something. And so he said, we put it on everything. Everything. I said, I remember walking in the market and saying, oh, Power Rangers mac and cheese. And it was really mostly on a bunch of junk food, but
of course,
it was pretty funny. It was very funny. It was a great gold mine for him.
In fact, let me see if I can share with you. I have a couple things here. So there's some Power Rangers cereals that we have here.
Oh yeah.
There's the Power Rangers oatmeal. How wild is this?
Oh God.
Yeah, Power Rangers.
Wonderful.
Yeah, Power Rangers oatmeal. Here's Power Rangers Ninjacio or Ninja Storm. There it is. Because the people's heads are covering it. I couldn't see it. And then, funny enough, these are some cereals we've reviewed on the podcast. The Red Ranger cereal, which is now going for almost $50 on eBay, and the Green Ranger cereal as well. That's going for $55 on eBay. I mean, it's just nuts, man. They had all this stuff.
Yeah. They had so much stuff.
I mean,
everybody wanted something to do with it.
Right? Yeah. One of my stories is that, kind of, it's funny, man. When I was a kid, I was a big Power Rangers fan, of course, as every 90s kid was. But, you know, the toys were such a huge deal. Like the toys that their heads flipped and like the Megazords and like all that stuff. Which, by the way, did your music have anything to do with that, with those commercials or anything like that?
I think sometimes they would use stuff, and once in a while they would just come in and say, we need something that sounds like the theme for a 30-second commercial. So have at it, and they will cut to whatever you do. So I would just bang something out. That kind of stuff took me half hour. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad. I'm just glad that at least you got a cut of it, because that's the thing is like a lot of the actors, like Walter Jones has said, I didn't even get a free version of my toy. Like I didn't even get to play the video game.
Same with me. No, same with me. This was all everything was bought out. I had no idea how big even things were. Well, I got a notion of how big the show was, but that was the deal at Saban Entertainment. And for the actors, it was all non-union and your rights were taken. But for me, it was like getting paid to go to college because it got me in the television. So it got me in the scoring. And then when I left, the phone never stopped. It's never stopped ringing.
I'm sure.
So it's been great.
Yeah, absolutely. And
the actors really got, they if it had been a union show for those guys, oh my gosh.
They'd still be making money. Yeah, I mean, it's nuts the amount of like, which, you know, it makes plenty of sense as to like why they merchandised everything and like all that stuff, because they're just like, well, let's make money off of this as much as we can. In fact, I remember a live tour. Wasn't there a live tour that the Power Rangers did? Oh, yeah, that was a nightmare for me. Absolute nightmare. Really? Please tell me. Funny, nobody's brought that up. There was a gal hired to choreograph everything. Yeah. And the deadline, I mean, this was a hard deadline. This thing was going on the road. And I could not get any timings out of her. I needed to say, like, okay, scene one is how long? 3 minutes. And I need to know when you're choreographing, what's hitting where. And I'll just visualize it and I'll write the music. And she just wouldn't give me the notes. So I just went ahead and scored the entire thing and handed it to her and said, now you're going to choreograph to what I think it's going to be. Right. And I remember going through the run through and Haim Saban's there and, you know, everybody's gathered around him. I was always very honest with him. And everybody's gathered around and he goes, Wasserman! And he screams and I run over. He goes, I can't do a good Haim impression, but he goes, what the fuck is this? This is the Wasserman show? What the whole fucking thing? And I said, I flat out busted the gal. She was right there. I said, I couldn't get the timings from her. You need to start rehearsals. That's how it is. And he looked at me and he said, good man. And then he took her and he said, let's talk. And they walked off and I went. And from that point on, all I heard is that she hated my guts. But I did nothing wrong, but that's the business. You did nothing wrong. Absolutely. Yeah, you did nothing wrong. You were just doing your job. I mean, I was begging for the notes. Give me the notes. Give me the timings, please. Yeah, how wild is that, man? Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's really funny. I love that. I forgot about that till you mentioned it. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, I remember going to it. I mean, I don't remember much, but I remember going to it, and it's just it's wild. Like they had literally everything. I mean, you know, I had a Power Rangers birthday party like when I was 8 years old. Like, I mean, they were everywhere. They were literally everywhere. I mean, it's wild. There was a Macy's Day Parade float, like so much so, you know, so much stuff. I mean, I'm sure there still is, like for years they've had like those Macy's balloons, you know, or whatever, but it's just wild, man. And I remember the Macy's Day Parade. First time I saw that, I went, wow. Yeah. This is something else. Yeah, it's nuts, man. Absolutely. So, you've created so much of people's fandoms, at least in my generation and younger. And I would want to know what your fandoms were when you were growing up. What were the TV shows that you got into? Even music. Like, what are some bands that made you want to start writing music?
Well, I actually started playing when I was 3 and writing when I was 5. So I kind of started creating almost out of the box.
That is wild.
It was just, and my influences were, because my dad hated listening to music on the radio. They'd have that song like, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know, I know. And he would hit the dash and go, I know already, and go back to the news. So I was on my own listening to music. But luckily, my uncle would give me his radios. He would buy me little radios. And then I had a ham radio or shortwave and started listening to stuff down in Mexico and South America. And I was really big on George Gershwin. But I was also listening to pop. So I was into some pop. And then I started finding the heavy metal shit for that time.
Sure.
Like Black Sabbath was a huge influence. And Led Zeppelin. And I mean, those were like the kings. Just brilliant guitar playing, brilliant songwriting, and just nasty, dirty stuff. I adored it. But, and to today, I'll be in the car and say, play classical. And then I'll go like, let's hear Straight Outta Compton. Yeah. So, now you just talk to your phone. And so, and I'm sure people look over, I'm just blasting Straight Outta Compton. They're probably like, oh my God, there's a gang member next to me. If they look over like, why is that old white guy listening to it? So it's always the same. It's whatever mood I'm in at the moment. And then it's never changed. Yeah. And television shows, they had silly comedies. I know I was very much into Saturday afternoons on KTLA. I think it was Channel 5 out here. They would show old movies, anything from Abbott and Costello, which I was really not into, to old Humphrey Bogart stuff. It was stuff before my time, and I really got into those scores behind these things, and then the silliness on network sitcoms.
Of course. Yeah.
But there was no real standouts. It was just diverse.
Right. Yeah, man, it's so funny that you say that because musicians are so vast in their knowledge of music because so many people will be like, oh, well, why would a Justin Bieber listen to metal or whatever the case? And it's people like that, people that create music, listen to everything, man. That's the whole reason why, even I was just watching this on YouTube and it was so funny. It was, can you spot the difference between a Taylor Swift lyric and a Bring Me the Horizon lyric, which, Bring Me the Horizon is a metal band. And 9 times out of 10, when you think it's a metal lyric, it's a Taylor Swift lyric. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's the whole thing because it's any musician that's worth their weight in salt loves so many different styles of music, and that's what we bring into to make who we are as our individual person, as a guitar player or as a pianist or as a singer or whatever the case, and
we're like vacuum cleaners. We suck up little bits of everything and it goes in our heads and we use it when we need to use it.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
I do appreciate people who are like walking encyclopedias and can listen to anything and go, oh, this solo that so-and-so did that guested on this song and that was recorded in. I'm like, I don't know any. I like the song.
Yeah. Yeah, I certainly can. I'm pretty nerdy about that stuff, but I don't know everything, I know
it's great that you do though.
Yeah, I mean, I know that Eddie Van Halen played in Thriller, but or beat it, but that's about it. Like little
Yeah, he
things
told
like
me
that.
about that session. He told me about that.
Oh yeah.
He said he walked in and they just said, he goes, they ran down the track. He said it wasn't really done. And I think Quincy Jones just said, kind of come in here and be Eddie Van Halen. And he went, okay. And apparently he just did it in one take and that was it.
Wow.
He said,
awesome.
I just blew that out. And I think he did a few other flourishes here and there throughout the song, but he said, yeah, I just did it. And then he goes, then later on, I get a call to play with this guy, Yo-Yo Ma. And I say, no, he turns it down. He goes, I had no idea he was a cello player. I thought he was a rapper and I didn't want to play with a rapper.
Yo-Yo Ma, the rapper.
Could you imagine what Eddie and Yo-Yo Ma could have done together?
That would have been nuts. I mean, it's like, it's like finding out the last song that was supposed to be on Thriller was with Freddie Mercury, but it didn't make the album. And so you're just like, if that song had been released, it would have literally been a perfect album. Like, I mean, he had everybody on that record. Paul McCartney was on that record, like Eddie Van Halen, like everybody was on Thriller, but yeah, that's crazy. I love that story.
Oh, I would love to hear that track with Freddie Mercury. Boy, I bet that's something.
I'm sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't know. I know I was watching a documentary on Thriller. That's how I found out about it. And yeah, I'm sure it's in a vault somewhere and we might hear it someday, but as of right now,
I think it would have happened. It would have happened. There's got to be Michael Jackson or maybe Freddie Mercury or who knows, or they must have said, never release this. And if that's how it's documented, they can never release it until somebody breaks into the vault and transfers the tracks to Pro Tools and just releases it.
Yeah, and that's a heist movie I want to see.
That would be a great heist movie to steal all these masters, unreleased masters from famous bands. That would be cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Steal all the unreleased masters from Prince. Like, that would be awesome. Like, just his random, like, vocal sessions. Because he I don't know if you knew this about Prince, but Prince had a microphone in every room in his house. So, like, if he had a good idea, he could just sing it and then it would show up in the studio. So, like, just these random, like, Prince was taking a deuce and then he just sings a song. You know what I mean?
Brilliant.
Like, how cool would that be? But yeah, I wanted to move on to our next bit here.
Okay. Usually
on this podcast, we like to talk about cereal because cereal is, I feel like, the most all-encompassing food of childhood. At least, on Saturday morning, you would have your cereal, you'd watch your cartoons. What were your favorite cereals growing up, and what were your favorite cartoons growing up?
Oh, man. Captain Crunch was probably my favorite, but I had a weird thing. I didn't like crunchy anything. So even though it's called Captain Crunch, I would put in the milk and I would let it sit for like 15 minutes till it became Captain Mush. And then that's what I enjoyed. So it was a bowl of squishy sugar.
Gotta be honest, though, that consistency is still pretty good. It's not that bad. I love that.
So I think that I remember having a lot of Captain Crunch and then cartoons. Wow. There was so much live action, ironically, when I was a kid. So, all the old Warner Brothers stuff I really loved because the scores were crazy. Yeah. And then I ended up watching these live action Saturday morning shows like HR Puffin stuff. And, and something called Land of the Lost, which later they made a movie of.
They sure did. And it was horrible.
And I'm trying to think of what else. So it was just, I was into that fantasy puppetry, ironically, later on with Power Rangers kind of stuff when I was a kid.
Of course.
That was, and the music was silly, but it was a lot of fun. But as far as animation, I don't remember having particularly favorite cartoons.
Man, how weird is that? I wonder when that started then, because when I was a kid, that was like they would just your entire Saturday was animated stuff. So like, I mean, really,
it was
Power
way better.
Rangers. Yeah, I mean, Power Rangers was like the only live action thing I really remember, being on a Saturday. Which I think, well, actually I'm wrong. Saved by the Bell probably as well was a live action thing. But yeah, like Power Rangers was one of the forefronts. But what's great about that show is like it's basically a cartoon with real people in it, because there's so much like puppetry happening and like, and Rita has these little toys that explode and become these big giant monsters and like, all that stuff. And
it was perfect. It was perfect.
Yeah, I love that so much. In fact, I wanted to talk to you about how you kind of got not in trouble, but like didn't like the Clinton administration say something about like the songs that were happening on Power Rangers?
Yeah, they were, there was a whole thing going on with Al Gore's wife at that time. He was a VP to Clinton, and Clinton, all the Clinton fundraisers were done at Saban's house in the 90s. Anytime he was in town, he stayed at Haim's. Well, I don't know if he stayed there, but all the fundraisers were there. So, and the heat was getting a little hotter with people thinking the music from Power Rangers or why their kids are beating the hell out of each other, which is absurd. And,
why would they do that with a song called Go, Go, Go Combat? Why would...
Yeah, really. I guess I should have said, go, 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 help your sister.
That's incredible.
So, the head of music came in and said, we're getting in trouble. And so, without saying it directly, it was basically the White House has asked if we could get rid of words like fight and combat, anything that incites violence, and stop using minor chords.
Right.
Start using major chords with a bigger smile. So I considered it a holy shit moment.
Of course.
And I went, okay. I just said, I'll do it. And then things get more positive, even though they still have kind of a direct message in them.
Yeah.
Because all these songs, not all, but most of these songs are all about my personal experiences. So not the theme, obviously.
No, absolutely. Wait, you didn't know Power Rangers growing up? Yeah. Yeah. So with those and with having to turn everything into major keys and everything, what kind of songs did you? I know "I Will Win" was one of them, right?
Yeah, it turned into "I Will Win," and even though I snuck in some minors, "We Need a Hero," and even "Cross My Line" is all pretty much major chords, but and that didn't seem like too harsh of a message. That was really kind of but all these songs were about my experience. "I Will Win" was about, or "Cross My Line," I can't remember. One of them or both of them, they're both about not getting the film, because I had the film they shot for 20th Century Fox.
Yeah.
I had met with them. They had sent me the dailies, meaning stuff that they shoot and they're roughly putting together. We all agreed that it will be scored exactly like the television show. I scored it. Fox loved what I did. And then, as I heard, again, Saban didn't want my name on as composer, as it wasn't on the series. And 20th Century Fox said, no, we're union, and his name will be on it. And so I got kicked off for that reason.
What a bummer, man. Oh, my God.
Now, Saban came to me and said, I said, I'm sorry that it didn't work out. And he goes, well, you're no John Williams. And at that moment, I just said, I am almost out of here, because I wanted to say, you're no Walt Disney. but
Right.
it was just one of those rubs. But he knew if my name appeared on that everybody, and they didn't even let me sing the song, the remake of the theme. And I knew Matt Sorum, who drummed on it. They wouldn't even let me go to the session. I mean, it was just weird. It was getting weird.
Yeah, no, it's so, man, Ron, I'm connecting with you so much on this because though I haven't had that exact moment, I've had moments like that as an artist where I'm just like, you know what, man? Like, it's that I'll show them mentality. It's like, no, man, fuck you. Like, I am gonna do this. You know what I mean? And like, and in a way, something beautiful came out of it, which is so cool. You know, like you were able.
Yes, absolutely. And I have no animosity whatsoever. It was just a moment. Stuff happens. I was incredibly run down from years of doing 70, 80-hour weeks.
Right.
And I just hit a point. And, I remember. So after that, I had gone with my then wife. We were flying back from the East Coast. And I just remember looking out the window at the wing and just going into this trance of this, what the hell's going on in my life? And then all of a sudden we were landing, which just never happened to me in my life. And that's when I really knew. And I went in and had a conversation with Haim a few days later and then we couldn't come to terms. And I said, I'm leaving. And then I continued to work for them on and off from home. But 2 weeks later, after leaving, I was working with this guy, Bob Ezrin, who produced The Wall and all this Alice Cooper. I was never a fan of Alice Cooper, but the guy's a genius and he has a gaming company. And now I'm scoring Tamagotchi and Ace Ventura. Monty Python. And then they introduced me to this guy, John Anderson, who's the lead singer for Yes. I spent 2 years with him doing a couple indie records in his living room. And it was just like and then I'm also scoring Dragonball Z at home. And I mean, it was I was all over the map. It was great.
In fact, all that you're saying, though incredible, the X-Men theme, man, like that X-Men theme is like one of the greatest themes in animation history, you know?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a strong one.
I mean, and was this after you worked with Saban or was this during that time?
No, that was prior to Power Rangers. That was actually what got me from mixing for the other composers, which was the first thing I did for my first 3 years there, and submitting stuff and having some really great producers there at Saban break me of the songwriting format, taught me more about scoring. And then I got little bits and pieces in some of their direct-to-home video, but X-Men was the day I officially became a television composer. And then I went from that day until June of 2018 with 2 1-week breaks. And although I've still done a ton since, it hasn't been 7 days a week. I can actually go out of town for a weekend now sometimes.
Yeah.
I have a bit more free time. I can go to the gym every day. I can hike.
Yeah.
It's not like it was.
Yeah, I know, man. I mean, so much so that you can give me a little bit of your time to do this podcast, which is really nice, you know?
I'm not stuck just sitting in front of a computer and keyboard, starting at 9 a.m. Because that whole thing, even, and I would still find time to do stuff, you know, raising my son who's now 19. But I would start every morning at 9 a.m., go till 5 or 6, go home, hang out with him for 2-3 hours, go back, work till midnight, and did that on weekends. I tried to limit it to, because he was so young, I would try to limit it to maybe 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Saturday and Sunday and spend time with him. And sometimes I'd be back in Sunday nights at 10, 11 at night with notes on something I was scoring and work all night, so that I could go to the mix stage in Hollywood on Monday, then run home and start scoring the other show I was working on.
Yeah, man, that is a crazy schedule. Holy cow.
But it's so fun.
I know. That's
so fun.
Of course, man. I mean, it's one of those things when, like, you know, as it's weird because it sounds corny, but the corniest things are true. You know, like when you do the thing that you love, you never have to work another day in your life. You know,
it's true.
Where it's like, yeah, it is true, man. I mean, I can say that as a comedian, as an actor, that like that is my full-time job, and I am really happy doing it. You know, sure, there's things about it that I don't like, but it's all worth it for the reasons that I do like it. You know?
Yeah, the creative process is the gold. The fixing or not fixing, the constant, because my system is, you know, doesn't look complicated, but it is the constant updates or finding out, okay, I'm writing stuff this week. There's the writer's strike going on. So now I'm doing a bunch of reality TV stuff, trying to figure out why this part is suddenly out of sync. All right. But I know all the workarounds. Those are the parts that are a pain in the ass, naming stuff, doing cue sheets, delivering separate sounds, stems for everything. That's all the boring stuff. Backing everything up, categorizing everything. But the actual process of working is just the best.
Oh, it's great. It's great. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I wanted to go back to how you said you were talking about scoring Ace Ventura. That's one of my favorite movies of all time. And can you tell me about that process? Like, what was that like? And if you remember anything,
I don't remember much about any of those games because they were PC games. And back then you had very, very limited memory for the music. And it all had to be done with sound cards that were put in PCs that used something called General MIDI. And I think you had a choice of 100, I can't remember, maybe 122 absolutely horrid, lame sounds. Just terrible, cheesy, terrible sounds. So you have to use those. And then they would come back and say, we need this and we can loop it at certain parts. You know, we're right into the software because we need this scored, but you have, I can't remember, like 12 kilobits of space for the music in this, which is not even a finger snap recorded now is bigger than everything's bigger than that. So you had to work within these real restrictions, but I did and tried to make it sound as good as I could. And that's how those games were. Now, of course, you know, you could have a fork, you could have anything. It's unlimited memory now.
Yeah, of course. Right. You're absolutely right. Yeah. And what's it? I was gonna ask you about scoring Dragon Ball Z as well. And how long did you score Dragon Ball Z through its whole run, or?
First 3 years.
First 3 years.
They called, Saban had called one day and said, we have this show that nobody gives a damn about. You want to do it? And I said, sure. And so they would send me a VHS tape. I was renting this little apartment by Beverly Hills High School, and at a 19-inch tube television, a VHS player, and on one side would be the time code, so everything would lock.
Right.
Which is, you know, if you've ever listened to the time code, it's like, it's this horrible screech, which bled through to the dialogue track, but you ignored it. I think I had one keyboard, a sampler, whatever Mac was the best at that time. And I would just bang out the scores and deliver it to them on a digital audio tape, and never got a note. Only got, okay, the next one's coming in 5 days, and just scored the whole thing wall to wall at home. It was fun. And I loved that show. Loved it.
Absolutely.
I had no idea it became such a big thing till about 2015. I think somebody wrote me about it. Nobody ever mentioned it past that. I would deliver. I never heard a thing. I never watched it. I knew nothing. I just thought, this is great. I hope it doesn't fail.
How funny is that Saban called you and told you, oh, there's this show that nobody gives a damn about. And I was thinking, what are you talking about? Because I remember my whole childhood, like everybody was talking about Dragon Ball Z, man. That was like the ish, you know? So,
well, that's been kind of part of my life. I've scored I mean, I don't watch that much anyways, and I've really rarely, if ever, watched anything I've scored when it's done or airing. But I mean, I still haven't watched this 30-year reunion, and I probably never will.
Okay.
The only thing is they told me I got a credit at the front, which is a very big deal. So I went and I went right up to that and I went, shit.
Yep.
This is wonderful. And that's as far as I watched it. But also remember, I worked on it for 6 weeks, day and night. So
yeah,
it's not like I don't know the story plot or anything.
Right. Of course.
But yeah, it's just, but everything I did, including my son's childhood, when he was really small, I was doing more sitcoms and stuff for slightly older and some teenager shows. Right. And then as soon as he got old enough to watch that, then I went back to little kid shows, and he was a little bit too old for that. So he has missed my entire career, which is just except for some of the stuff I did for SpongeBob. We were in sync for a moment, but I didn't do that much for SpongeBob. But man, he would go, that's you. And I'm like, yeah.
Something I've learned through comedy is that all generations understand SpongeBob references. So like as long as you know a little bit of SpongeBob, you're cool to pretty much everybody, you know? Yeah. So at least you got that, you know. That's how funny is that, man? Like because at the end of the day, it's our kids that tell us that we aren't shit. You know what I mean? Like, so
I've had so many times I've pulled him in on stuff and said, what do you think of this? Especially this video game I've been scoring. He's like, yeah, that's badass.
Yeah.
All right, good. I said, thank you. Thank you for your, you know, it's important. And other times I've played him stuff and he's like, and stuff that's done fine. But he's come back and he said, yes, I like it. There's something. I'm like, just, that's enough. That's all you have to say. I'll go back. I'll tweak it.
Have you thought about adding the word fight or combat?
Yeah. Or putting how about a large gong or bell sound, tubular bell sound for the hole in X-Men? See, he would have thought that up because there was a blank spot.
So, full disclosure, I watched your podcast interview with Andre Meadows with Black Nerd Comedy. Love him so much. And I mean, my brain exploded when you said that you just put a random gong in the X-Men theme. And I was just like, yes, this is great.
I knew because I kept the notes were always, you know, we can't hear the digga digga digga, so I turned that up. Oh, now we can't hear the hi-hat, which has just been like a joke forever with how many hi-hat tracks there were. Right. And then now we can't hear this, now we can't hear this. So I just said, oh my gosh, there's going to be this 10 millisecond hole here, and somebody's going to come back and say, wait a minute, what goes on here? So I just went, dong.
There is literally not a millisecond of silence.
It is a wall of sound.
Yeah, it is so funny. That is wild, man. That they would just be like, oh, well, there's like a second, a half of a quarter note of sound that you need. So,
and you also had to write everything and mix it because they were still same with Power Rangers, same with the songs. You always had to check mono compatibility because a majority of the country didn't have stereo yet.
Exactly.
And if you have your frequencies conflicting with each other, or you have phase cancellation problems, there's times you go down the mono and you're like, where did the guitars go? Where did this go? So everything was delivered in mono and stereo per market, as far as I know. I don't really know how that side works.
Yeah.
But I just went mono.
Right? Yeah.
The Beatles were doing shit in stereo, and we have to do stuff in mono. We're in the 1990s.
Yeah, that's what a weird thing, man. That's wild. It's kind of the same thing. It's kind of come back to that now, where like even when I'm recording my podcast, I have to send it back in mono so they can then make it in stereo. I don't know what they do, but again, it's the same exact thing because the voice sounds better in mono for some strange reason. I don't know why.
Yeah,
but
beats me.
It's super weird. But man, Ron, this is so incredible. I have a couple more questions for you, but first I just need to say thank you so much for doing this. It means the entire world that you took some time to talk to me. You mean so much to me as well as millions and millions and millions of people, because you've created, just such great music for great things. And I didn't want that to go unnoticed.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Of course, man. I just wanted to say that before, I ask you these last couple of things here. But the first question that I want to ask you here is, what advice would you give to your younger self if you could talk to them right now?
Don't do anything different. I would follow with all the, as I've said in other interviews, what I went through, I grew up poor and then kind of tried to find my way to do things, which was fine. And then worked a lot of horrible jobs while trying to figure out maybe I should go into music, and then join bands, and then figured out I could write better than the other people, kind of took over, started learning to produce, weaseled my way into studios, doing anything up to, without knowingly even doing it, like delivering drugs. Because somebody had a home studio, go, hey, take this bag over to my friend. Here's the address. And then I'd come back with a bag, and they'd go like, cool, go ahead and use the studio. Anything to just sit in the studio. And then really almost being homeless at times. At the absolute lowest, I was living in the valley, and on Laurel Canyon and Riverside was a Mrs. Gooch's, which turned into Whole Foods. And I remember sometimes literally going into the trash dumpster to grab something because they would throw away food that was still wrapped. And then breaking, and then the 80s bands making a little, but running up terrible debt, and then ending up at Saban. I mean, it's been exactly what you need to do to first always give back once something happens, always make time to talk to people like we are, and appreciate every second, but realize it could all disappear in a second. And what you do is no more important than what anybody else does. So I am glad I've been through it all, including playing in bands and grabbing my gear and jumping out of a window because there's a fight breaking out and people are being stabbed. I mean, I have seen it all. I've had people OD in front of me, people and roadies commit suicide. It has been quite an experience.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't trade anything unless maybe I would say, go to law school and be a lawyer. I'd be miserable.
Yeah, of course. And that's the funny thing, right? Is that if we were to be like, hey, we're a musician 30 years later or 40 years later, but you know what? Go to law school. Like, you'd be miserable if you did. So you'd end up still staying the path, because if I told myself, oh, go to law school, I wouldn't do it. Like, I can't, I'm just not that person. Yeah. I'm not that person at all. Man, first of all, to everything that you just said, that deserves a giant hell yeah. Like, that was awesome. because it's so inspiring, and again, I really relate to you, because when I was living out in LA before I came back here, I was homeless for a little while. I was living in my car, and man, I told this story once, and it was so funny, because I was talking to one of my comedian friends, and I was like, I had no money. In fact, the only money I had left was to buy like one chicken tender at Popeyes. And I just and I went to Popeyes, and I was crying eating this chicken tender at Popeyes, and he stopped me and he goes, he goes, is that the Popeyes on Hollywood Boulevard? And I said, yeah. And he goes, dude, I cried at that same Popeyes. And it's like, it's this beautiful thing that like every performer in LA has been through something, you know? And it's awesome. Like in a weird way, like we have this kinship, this like sibling ship with each other where we're like, hey man, like I see your pain and I know where you've been. Like we're war buddies in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I'm telling you that the best path has been this slowly getting up the ladder, slowly opening doors. Cause people I know that had early success, their later lives have been a bit of a mess because they were young, they were making a ton of money. Some of them were well known and, you know, they started living that lifestyle. I didn't have time. I didn't have the money, but I didn't have the time to even, and I just like never did hard drugs, but I mean, it was never there and they did. And now they're screwed up. And now I'm like pretty happy with everything.
Right.
So it's good. Yeah. It's all about slowly getting somewhere. And that's why I've told young composers when they want to break in and they think they're going to get an agent. I've never even had an agent.
Right.
It's all about meeting people. It's all about, and you start off by knocking on a production company's door and basically saying, I make great coffee. I'm available 24/7. I'm your bitch. And if you're brilliant, my friend did that with Hans Zimmer. Company.
Really?
And then he ended up doing the sample libraries and then he ended up scoring. And then unfortunately some stuff happened and he had to do other things. He still writes, but that's what he did. He knocked on the door and said, I'll live here. I'll do whatever you need. And they said, come on in.
Yeah. The worst thing that I always thought this when I was out in LA was I was like, the worst thing anybody can say to me is no. And I already don't have it. So nothing bad can really happen. You know what I mean? Like,
it's true.
Just try, you know, and I'm definitely, I have the confidence where I'm like, if you just let me in the door, I'll give you every reason to keep me in your office, but just let me in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
and then you take their advice and nothing you do is precious. I mean, I've had times I've written something that I went, wow, this is perfect. And they came back and said, do something completely different. This happened to Randy Newman on Toy Story. He delivered some part of the score or the songs. And he said he told this in front of the Disney people at a composer awards thing, which he's a brave man, but he's so famous. Yeah. But he was saying he sat there and he said, the Disney people said, well, we don't like this. We don't like that. So he said, I just sat there and I said, okay, time for me to lower my expectations, and went back. And if what he did was lowering expectations, then that was crazy.
I mean,
he also said at one point he pulled out his pulled out his wallet. He said his reasoning to lower his expectations to what he wants is he pulled out his wallet and started petting it and saying, "You're going to love this movie."
That's hilarious. Yes,
such a funny guy.
Yes, dude. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Yeah, but
everybody gets notes.
Yeah, everybody gets notes, and it's funny how you say, like, you know, to Randy Newman, lowering your expectations is what we ended up getting in Toy Story, which is like, an amazing score.
Amazing score, and some lives of the best songs.
Will live on forever, live on past us. You know, like, I mean, it's wild. You know,
and the such an early Americana style the guy has. He's just
of course
from another planet.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. The last question I have for you, Ron, is what do you think that that kid that you were growing up would think of who you are now?
He would really say, you did what?
Yeah.
Because it's not like I wanted to be a rock star or anything else. I mean, my goal when I was young is I thought if I can ever make $35,000 or $50,000 a year, I am going to be just so happy.
Right.
Just so happy. If I can ever just make that, because that much money, even in 2 years, just
right.
It wasn't about making money though. It's just, I saw that lifestyle. You're in LA. You know, I'm driving a car that the wheels are falling off of next to a Bentley or a Rolls Royce with Al Pacino in it.
Right.
Yeah. It's so diverse, and it's so, I think, and that little kid never even dreamt of this, never thought about even going into music, really had no idea. I had no plan.
That's crazy.
So
man.
I think the kid would be shocked.
But I also feel like at the same time, like, that's pretty badass, you know, like, especially like getting to create all the stuff that you've created, and even full circle, you know, to how, you know, we talked about it before, but it was such a full circle moment where they didn't want to put your name on Power Rangers. And in this new special, it is front and center, you know, music.
There is
Ron
karma.
Wasserman. Yeah.
There is karma, and there is justice. You just have to wait, you know, and obviously I was credited in a million other things with Disney, but also, but there really is you just have to be patient for all that you go through in this business. If you just stay persistent, always nice, because there's no reason to get upset about anything. Just stay cool, be nice, and be persistent and tenacious, and always try to be better than the other guy you're competing against somehow.
Yeah, right. Which is really difficult
because the competition's fierce.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. Ron Wasserman, everybody. Oh my gosh. Where can everybody find you online? Ron, WRONW.com. Nice. Or just Google my name. There's lots of funny stuff and a lot of bad pictures of me. I love it, man. Thank you guys so much for listening. For me, you can find me on Instagram at Mike Valdes, on my TikTok at official Mike Valdes. You can also find anything else that you want as far as the shows that I'm performing, or videos, clips, anything at thekidfromup.com. That is a real website until Disney sues me. And other than that, thank you so much for listening. Don't lose your sense of childlike wonder. Bye, besties.